Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your minds and open your seatbelts, for the extraordinary awaits. This, my friends, is the epicenter of the podcast universe, the sanctuary of the surreal, the one and only podcast where reality meets fantasy. This is the world of Jason Morrison. And this, dear listeners, is what happens when he is allowed to write the script to his own show opener. Welcome to Have You Read This?
Once a movie happens, and particularly a bad or exploitative movie, then you have that vision of the character forever, you know what I mean? To bring in another story, my dad was a military person, and of course, the military is not always at war, thank God. And one of the jobs that he had when he was off duty, on the base, he would work as a projectionist. So before films were shown with computers, there had to be a human being there to show those movies. And I would sit up and I would watch all these films of, these beautiful white women and beautiful white men. And if there was a black woman in it, it would be the obese kind of ugly maid shuffling in. Yes, sir, And I would think of how humiliated and ashamed I would feel once I realized, because at first, of course, I identified with the beautiful white people. And then I realized, oh, I'm not them. My daddy and mommy are not them. We're that, the maid, you know what I mean? And I thought about what a hard moment that was for me as a young woman. And I didn't want that to happen to my film. I didn't want, I had taken some very sensitive material that wasn't my life experience. I don't know anything about welfare. My parents always worked, so I had gone into something that I had seen, and I had portrayed it as sensitively as I could. And women who had read the book came to me and said, thank you. And I didn't want them to go see a movie and feel ashamed. I didn't want heavy-set black women to look to see a movie image of someone like Precious and feel ashamed. I wanted them to feel the pain that our collective situation brings, but I didn't want them to.
You didn't want it to be exploited.
Exploited, and so I just said no. And no one who came to me was really showing me that they could do it in any other kind of way.
With dignity and
with
respect.
With dignity, and at the same time really going for the grit and the pain that's in there. I mean, I'm sure someone could have made it a stand up and deliver type film, that type of inspirational teacher saves student type film, but would they be able to show the abuse in the home that had driven her to this and still have a character that we could empathize with as opposed to pity?
Push has been on my shelf for, man, I don't even know how long now. I think a couple years. I've actually had a physical copy of this thing. And I really think the reason that it's just sat there for so long is there's really only one reason. And that was I saw the movie Precious. If you're not familiar with the book Push or the movie Precious, which is based on the book by Sapphire, then I kind of would be shocked a little bit, honestly. I feel like this movie, it was well known, or at least well known enough when it was released. However, given just how dark it was, I don't know how much traction it got. It's not going to go extremely mainstream like some of this typical crap that The Rock stars in, for example. So I could see why people might have missed this one. And I've seen a lot of dark movies, and I got to say I had a difficult time with this one. It was a really tough watch. It was in a lot of ways very similar to watching the movie Kids for the first time. And I thought both Kids and Precious, they were both movies. I'm only going to watch them once. Yeah. Once was enough. They were both hard to sit through. And I just wasn't sure if I wanted to read the same thing that I saw on screen. However, I think there was a part of me that was just curious, and I wanted to see what the book was about. Maybe there was something hidden in there that didn't quite make it to the movie. Maybe the book was even more powerful. I'm always a huge advocate that the book is always going to be better than the movie. So I thought, you know what? Let me give this a shot. And I did something crazy. I didn't buy a brand new book. I actually went to the shelf and got something that I already owned. So for you book fanatics out there, it's possible that something like that can occur. And I know I've talked a little bit about the movie Precious, but you know what? For now, this is a podcast about books and not movies. So maybe we should start talking about the book Push. I figured I would see where the book stacked up against the movie, and I started where I always do, the synopsis.
An electrifying first novel that shocks by its language, its circumstances, and its brutal honesty. Push recounts a young black street girl's horrendous and redemptive journey through a Harlem inferno. For Precious Jones, 16 and pregnant with her father's child, miraculous hope appears, and the world begins to open up for her when a courageous, determined teacher bullies, cajoles, and inspires her to learn to read, to define her own feelings and set them down in a diary.
The novel follows Clarice Precious Jones, who lives in Harlem with an abusive mother, and as you should have gathered from the synopsis, an abusive father. I don't know what typically goes through your mind when you hear the phrase abusive parents, but the degree to which this 16-year-old girl has suffered, it feels beyond abusive to me. Abusive is putting it, I think, too mildly. It's a level of inexcusable horror that I just have trouble wrapping my mind around. And I think because of the way that it's presented makes it so difficult. Books like Cows and Hog, that's tough, but you know it's fiction. This is presented in such a realistic and believable manner that contributes to the difficulty of reading this. When readers are introduced to Precious in the novel, she's already pregnant with her second child. Both pregnancies are a result of being raped by her father, Carl. The first child was actually born with Down syndrome, and Precious had been told that the child was a mongoloid. In my work with those affected by disability over the years, I have spoken with parents and read books by those who can recall quite vividly being told something similar about their child. Sadly, we're not that far removed from terms like mongoloid when referring to a child with disability. It feels just so demeaning. And Precious is illiterate, and she's just barely getting by in school. And the language and dialogue in the novel is meant to reflect this, which makes it even more heartbreaking that she refers to her first child as Little Mongo. Because of the second pregnancy, Precious is kicked out of school, and she ends up transitioning over to an alternative school, which turns out to be a blessing in disguise. And I think this is one of the few glimmers of hope and bright lights in the novel, because Precious meets Miss Rain, and she's also in class with other students. All of these students have a below 8th grade reading and writing level, and also all of them have endured, I would say, some form of trauma in their own life. And there's one thing that I don't think that the movie shows, where Precious and another one of these girls ends up going to a support group for survivors of incest. Now, Miss Rain, she's capable of seeing beyond the trauma and where people are in their life, and she's able to meet them where they are. And I think she's part of this catalyst that helps instill hope and confidence in all of the girls that are in this class. And part of this is she makes each one of them keep a journal, and she'll go read these, and these entries are extremely personal. And you get a sample of some of these in the book. And I think for me, a notable and potent part of this novel comes at the very end. And I'm not going to spoil this, but I'll say that there's a collection of journal entries at the end. They're the journal entries and stories from Miss Rain's class, and it's titled Life Stories, Our Class Book. And it's told from everybody's perspective. And I just felt like that was a really powerful way to end what you read. The dialogue here, I think, is also a part of the reason that I felt like this book was as powerful as it is. It's told from Precious's point of view in her own words. And obviously, she's functionally illiterate. So you're seeing a lot of that in the dialogue and the writing and the spelling. And it took me a little bit to kind of get used to being able to read it from her point of view. But I think there's a level of honesty in the words that hurts, because it shows just how terrible of a life she has had. However, as the book moves forward, we do start to see changes in, I would say, her attitude, specifically her confidence. The dialogue and the language, I think, gradually improves, but it still reflects the world that she's working to try to escape. And I saw something online that said, is Precious stupid? And I think some people can confuse functionally illiterate with stupidity. I definitely would not say that this character is stupid. Yeah, she finds herself in a world that she wants to leave, and she doesn't have the proper means of escape. She's barely getting by in school. None of this to me means that she is stupid or lazy. I would say, if anything, she could be labeled as being maybe not book smart, but as you follow her story, you see that she is smart. She does have dreams. She has goals. She has a very vivid imagination. I think some of that would be a product of processing the trauma that she's had to deal with. You learn that she does want to be in a better place. She doesn't want to stay in this abusive household, and she doesn't want her kids to experience what she's had to. And whenever I put together these episodes, I usually take a few moments, and sometimes I don't know why I do this, because I feel like it's torture, but I like to look at other reviews to see what other people thought. And I try not to read these things before the book. Usually I'll read, kind of process things and write my review. And then out of curiosity, I'll go see what other people thought. Cause I don't want to have my opinion changed based on a review before I read the book or after. I just want that to kind of stand alone on its own. But this one got me curious to see. I wanted to see what other people thought. And I don't know why, since really my opinion's the only one that matters. There was one review in particular that stood out, and I read the first part of it. And after the first part of it, I decided that this person probably shouldn't have access to books. Maybe I would just be too ticked off to kind of read all the other garbage that they wrote. And I get it. No book is for everyone. I understand that. But still, I think this person missed out on what Sapphire was truly trying to accomplish by telling the story. And in some ways, it kind of made me feel like all of the reviews, not all of them, the majority of the views that you would see when you're looking at reviews for a book like Tampa by Alyssa Nutting. That book was really graphic. That book was really hard to read. And there was a lot of people that's all they focused on, just the graphic nature of it. I don't think the people that got just solely focused on the graphic nature of that or this book can really see the point if that's all you're focused on. I think that's a part of how the story is told, and you can't tell that kind of story without this level of graphicness. And it's just my opinion, take it or leave it. But anyway, this reviewer wrote this: the rape details, I get it. It was heinous and disgusting, but I really think the author wanted everyone who read this book to feel raped along with Precious, so that we can just feel raped. As readers, we can't be trusted by Sapphire to be empathetic enough on our own. And yeah, and I had to cut out some of this stuff, but this reviewer went on to say this: I am seeing comments declaring that if an author can make you go through the character's trauma with her, then she is doing a good job. I disagree with this sentiment. The author's job is to express what the character is experiencing without personally attacking you as the reader. And this is what Push delivers, a personal attack, instead of gathering my interest to help girls like Precious. I don't know who wrote that. I'm not going to call you out, but we should just delete your Goodreads account. If you're too sensitive, then books like Push just aren't for you. Maybe coloring books, or might I recommend a nice series of the Berenstain Bears? That would probably be better for you because then you wouldn't feel personally attacked. You can't pick up a book like Push and truly experience what the author meant if you're worried about being attacked. And I really don't know what to make of that when I first read it, because honestly, I felt hurt and sad and angry, but this was more in relation to what this girl had experienced. And I thought Sapphire did an excellent job with the writing. She drops you into this instantly and you feel like you're there. I'm just thankful that I've never read a book and felt personally attacked. But you know, that's perks of being able to use my brain. So this book is extremely powerful. The movie was extremely powerful. And the book did, I would say, include more details, as I expected, that the movie just probably couldn't cover. I think some things always end up on the cutting room floor. And the movie, I think, was pretty true to the book. It still got the point across. I do wonder if I had read the book first, if I have still wanted to see the movie. The book is dark. It's not easy to read. I honestly, I don't know. I don't know. There's times where I'm like, yeah, you probably would have gone to see the movie just because it's dark and you wanted to see, okay, how would they translate this writing into a movie? And then there's part of me that feels like, well, that was dark enough. I don't need to see a movie of it. If they ever made a movie about cows or hog or dead inside, you know what? Probably going to leave those alone. So the book was enough. And I think for me, for this, there's part of me that's leaning a little bit more towards the side where if I'd have read the book first, I probably would not have wanted to see the movie. However, I can say that the movie, the acting is really good, especially Monique. Like, she deserves all the accolades for that, because I don't know any person that has embodied a role so well. And I've tried to go through this episode without spoilers, but I do want to talk about the book's ending. And if you don't like spoilers, you can just sort of skip over this part. So consider yourself warned here for the next couple minutes. I have to say, I love the book, but I had a little trouble with the ending. And I think the movie ended pretty much the same way, which is to say that it kind of leaves you hanging. It was really open-ended. And I had felt as if I just wanted some more closure, but maybe that's just what Sapphire wanted with this story. You know, I've not looked up any interviews with her specifically about the ending, so can't really say for sure. However, my guess would be that maybe she wanted to leave it open for interpretation, knowing that Precious would not be returning home and that she would take her kids, this new confidence, education, and make a better life for herself. That's kind of what I was hoping. And I think as you read or watch anything dark, at the end, you're like, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel, everything's going to be all right kind of thing. And since it was left open-ended, I mean, we really don't know. After enduring her life in this novel, I imagine that would be what any reader would want, hopefully. But we also live in the real world without fairy tale endings. And I mean, really, given how horrible her life was, there was a part of me that was kind of expecting her to walk out of her apartment one day and just be run over by a bus. And thankfully, that never happened. I did some research and found that back in 2011, Sapphire wrote a follow-up, and it was called The Kid. I've not read this one yet. However, for anyone curious about what happened beyond the story of Push, this book follows Precious's son, Abdul, from the age of 9 to 19. And let me tell you, folks on Goodreads are big mad about this one too. More so than Push. The average reviews, I would say, are low enough where I think it might discourage people from reading it. And some of these reviews are they're really heated. And I got to say that actually kind of makes me want to read it even more. In the end, I would say with all certainty that Push is a very important book to read. This is an important voice to hear. It's one that will most likely stay with me, as it isn't an easily forgettable story at all. It's hard to read. I think it's challenging. I think it's very thought-provoking. And that's why I feel it's important. And in kind of in the back of my head, I've been working through, and I don't know why this is important, but I've been working through my own personal top 10 most dark and disturbing reads. And I have a feeling that this one has a place on that list somewhere. Just not exactly sure, but this one is certainly up there. Right now, I am reading You Watched in Silence by H. Lee Justine, a book that was sent to me after watching some of my TikTok videos, which honestly, that kind of blows my mind because I just really feel like a lot of the crap that I post on TikTok is stupid and boring. But this book, I would say, I would label this one primarily thriller, horror, and I think it's moving, this book is moving fast. I started reading and I looked up and I was like 6 chapters in, which I love that. And I got to say, I have high hopes for the ending of this. If it sucks, I'm probably just going to throw my Kindle in the street. But after that, I have another book that I was sent via TikTok that I want to dig into. And beyond that, I'm considering reading and doing an episode about a recent purchase that just showed up that I worry put me on an FBI watch list. Yeah, exciting stuff. But hey, I promise you, I just love to read a variety of books, and I am not actually a psychopath planning something terrible. So congratulations on having an attention span longer than a footnote, as you have made it to the end of another episode of me ranting about paper rectangles. I'd love for you to subscribe, but let's be real, the chances you made it this far are slim to none, and you're probably stopped halfway through and are already scrolling on TikTok. Until next time.
Oh, look, another podcast begging for followers and 5-star reviews. Because clearly your life won't be complete without their riveting discussions about what books they think are worth reading. But really, it doesn't take a lot of time to write a glowing review and follow me on Instagram, does it? It is quick and painless, so just do it, and bask in the glow of knowing you have contributed to the endless void of self-indulgent online content. Oh, by the way, sign up for the newsletter while you're at it. Link in bio and all that crap.